Welcome everyone to Winter Crash, Conference for the Research in Arts, Social Sciences, and Humanities. This is a conference where we showcase research in the arts, social sciences, humanities, because we really want students in our community and at the university to understand that research isn't just STEM, and we want to give these areas the spotlight that they deserve. And today, our presenters are going to have research about gender, about women, because it is Women's History Month. And I'm going to introduce our moderator, and then I will turn it over to our moderator to get things started. So our moderator is Hannah Axman. She serves as the Assistant Director for Education at the UC San Diego Women's Center. She has been in her role for about a year and a half and loves life in San Diego. Don't we all? She was a psychology major and a double minor in chemistry and family studies and human development. Her master's is in counselor education, and in her free time, she likes to go hiking, crafting, and doing anything related to Star Wars or Disney. So with that, I will turn it over to Hannah.
Hello, folks. Marie, thank you so much for the introduction. Like was shared, my name is Hannah Axmid. I use the she, her pronoun series, and I'll be our moderator for our time together. March is Women's History Month, and this year the national theme has been celebrating women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I believe that all of our students and faculty doing research around these topics really do continue to make waves in our world, and their presence in these various academic spaces, like was named STEM or not, really in itself is an act of resistance. So y'all excited to hear about your work. And we really have quite a range of majors across our presenters today. Our flow for the winter 2024 crash is we're going to have each student researcher share about the research for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I will be watching the chat. So feel free to message me directly or put them in the chat kind of as you have them. Any Q&A that you would like to ask. So we'll get through all of those presentations first. I'll add some insight in between each of those. And then we'll do our Q&A at the end for questions that come in. And then I have some questions for our panelists as well. So yeah, again, if I would request that folks message me any questions that you may have in that chat function, and I will work to direct those to our panelists. So first I would say, question for you, Marie, is the left to right on your presentation slide the order in which we would like to go?
No, we can go in the order you have on your sheet.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So then we're going to start with Zaira Layal, who is a third-year transfer, a biological anthropology major. Her research was around U.S. preterm birth rates during early pandemic, that it may reveal a novel occurrence of the Hispanic paradox. And her mentor is Dr. Amy L. Nan in the anthropology department. So I would love to welcome Zaira to the floor.
Thank you so much. Let me just pop up my PowerPoint. All right, and then let me know if you can see it.
Can't see it yet.
What about now?
Let's see.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it's because I'm not sharing screen. One sec.
I was saying, and ask for folks on the call. Yes, beautiful. I would say we can see some notes at the moment, but for folks on the call, some other Zoom pieces, if folks can make sure that their audio is off for the duration of our speakers, you're welcome to keep your cameras on or off. And then, yeah, depending on the questions towards the end, you're welcome to come off mute and ask those as well. But we'll pass it on back for our first panelist, our first researcher.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my research. I just got the a huge opportunity to go share this at a conference, which was my second time doing a symposium talk, and it was absolutely terrifying, but we got through it. So this one should be, I think, a little bit easier. If not, we'll see. So pretty much, my name is Saida. I study preterm birth rates. I am in biological anthropology, but I found that you can make your research about anything. So I really like public health, and I'm kind of getting into bioinformatics. So I'm learning how to code, and I'm using my research to navigate the things that I want to learn how to study. So right now, I grew this question from like my last research question. And so we were trying to look up to see if preterm birth rates dropped during the COVID-19 pandemic for people that had like more money, and if they rose for people that were in like minority groups. So we hypothesized that for Black and Hispanic women, the preterm birth rates would like skyrocket, while for more educated and white women, preterm birth rates would drop. And so that's kind of what we found, but we found something that was very unexpected, and it relates to the Hispanic paradox. So I asked my mentor if I could kind of just go down that lane and try to see what I find, and she said yes. So this is why I have a picture of my family here. This is my really big family. My grandma had 15 kids, so we there's always a lot of fun at our family gatherings. But what I wanted to look into was a Hispanic paradox. So that just means that there's something weird going on among Hispanic communities where even though there's really difficult like socioeconomic barriers and like lack of educational opportunities sometimes, there's still better health outcomes. And so that's what I was very intrigued by. And so my question is, do preterm birth rates vary by nativity, which means like where people were born, among Hispanic women? I cannot switch to the next slide. One sec. Okay, cool. So preterm birth, this is just when a woman gives birth before the 37th week of gestation. And it's really interesting to study because it's the leading cause, or preterm birth complications are the leading cause of death in children under 5 years old. And it's not completely understood why it happens, but it is known that with more stress comes a higher rate of preterm births. So then these stressors they can be like climate. So if there's more heat, there's like an increase of preterm birth. But then also when there's like social political stressors, preterm birth rates have been known to increase. So like, for example, in the 2016 presidential election, there was an increase of preterm births among Latino women. And so there's indicators that preterm birth rates kind of change with stress. And so they're indicators of population stress levels. And so this is from the last year where we saw this significant drop in preterm births. So let me actually just go to this one right here. So our data set is from the CDC natality files, where we have access to birth rates or like birth outcomes from every single woman in the US, which was really nice because you get like a representative sample. And so what we thought was that there was going to be originally an increase in preterm birth because it was a very stressful time during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. But what we saw was this like decrease, and you can't really tell right here, but this line in the red symbolizes 2020. And so there's this drop right here in preterm birth, right? And so that's when we started stratifying by like race, ethnicity, level of education. And so what we found was that there was an increase for preterm birth. Sorry, there was a decrease for everybody, but there was more of a decrease for Hispanic women. And so that was really weird because if you guys remember during the 2020 pandemic time period, there was like a lot of hospitalization and like death rates among Hispanic and Black women. And so what we thought was that there was also going to be like an increase of adverse birth outcomes among Hispanic and Black women, but that's not what we saw. If anything, we saw this like protective factor. So this is where we focus right here. This is from 2016 to 2021. Like this is the preterm birth rates throughout all these years. And this is the predicted versus actual. So the black dots symbolize the actual rates. And then the blue line is like the predicted scale of preterm birth. And so the shading is like the confidence interval. So pretty much what we see is just that in 2020, there was a drop outside of the predicted rate for Hispanic women in terms of preterm birth. And this is just my family because we ended up going to Reno for these results to go present at the last AABA conference. And so they paid for like my hotel room and my travel and everything. And I got to bring my mom and my little brother. So that was really nice. And I just wanted to include that. So then to answer like what happened during this drop in 2020, my mentor just said like, oh, sometimes there's a lot of reports that say that there's this Hispanic paradox going on where despite external barriers and like external stressors, for some reason Hispanic people have better health outcomes. And so that's where we have this theory, right, which is the Hispanic paradox that says that For decades, epidemiologists have documented a health advantage among Hispanic and Latinx individuals who live in the US despite significant socioeconomic barriers. And I thought that was really weird. And I didn't really have a way to like look into it further. But when I looked at like all the code and like all the variables that the CDC had, I noticed that there was an option for whether or not the mom was born in the US or outside of the US. So I thought, how does nativity play a role into the Hispanic paradox and then into the health outcomes? So like, just did preterm birth rates vary by nativity among Hispanic women during the COVID-19 pandemic was my question. But in reality, the train of thought was a little bit like deeper. So I thought that there's two options. So the whole like stress theory with preterm birth is that more stress equals higher preterm birth, right? But then the Hispanic paradox says that more stress does not necessarily have to equal more like worse health outcomes. If anything, there's this protective factor. And so I thought, if there's a protective factor within like Hispanic communities, maybe it's even stronger in women that are not born in the US, because maybe it's like acculturation. So the less women are acculturated to the American culture, maybe like the more they have like their traditional values and like practices. And I think within those traditional values and practices is where we're getting that protective factor. And so the train of thought was this protective factor that mediates the stress response is stronger and less Americanized and acculturated women because of things like living in a multi-generational household and like listening to your grandparents and their advice. And I think that really just relates to health. So this is the intersection where your culture relates to your biology, which is like biological anthropology. And so I think that the status of grandparents and respect for their advice, which is rooted in like in wisdom, is symbolized by the age-related traits like white hair. It just having those people around you in your household and like having to listen to what they tell you, I think just generates better health outcomes, because we have this saying that says, el que no oye consejo no llega viejo, which is like the one that doesn't listen to the old doesn't get to be old, you know? So it's like these little places where culture plays a role into our health. And so one theory was that preterm birth rates dropped and were even better than for foreign-born Hispanic women than for US-born Hispanic women. And that's kind of like the positive side of things. But then there's also this hypothesis which says that maybe they were worse among foreign-born women because there's additional stressors. And this is relating to immigration. So for foreign-born women, by definition, it means that you have no birthright citizenship. So unless you become a citizen later on, but like you're not born with it. And with that comes an umbrella of stressors that I think translate into health. So like fear of deportation, concerns for safety or of self or family members, and then just lack of social mobility opportunities. So having no work permit means that you are under you're more likely to have like an abusive, high labor, below minimum wage, under the table job, which that constant and chronic level of stress does add like additional stressors to your body, which can then become like more of a likelihood of having an adverse outcome or like an adverse health outcome like preterm birth, right? And then I took advantage of the fact that I presented this at the AABA conference, because there is a whole workshop about how we can get into higher education and then just apply to like all these grants and everything. And then I was like, okay, but what about for the women that aren't born in the US? And then they were like, oh, so sorry, you can't apply to this grant. You can't apply to this grant. You can't apply to this grant. And so I was like, within higher education, there is an ineligibility for federal funds. And then I just named like one of the really big scholarships that they were telling us to apply to. And so my whole point was there are additional barriers and they can be mitigated by funding or like finding ways around federal funds. And I think that was just my way of like taking advantage of where I was at with the people that I had been networking in for like 5 days. And so I included that here. But anyways, so preterm birth, once we stratified from 2016 to 2021, all like among all Hispanic women, and then we stratified again by if they were born in the US or not born in the US, we did find a difference. And so the difference was that there was a significant drop among foreign-born Hispanic women during 2020, which was supposed to be a very stressful year, indicating that the first hypothesis was correct, that yes, there are additional stressors, but for foreign-born Hispanic women, there is a protective factor that is even stronger than for US-born Hispanic women. And we can clearly see that here because there's this significant drop outside of the expected trend. And so that tells us like a few things. It's just, first of all, there's like something going on that's very protective. But also, if you see the trajectory between 2016 to 2021, it's this like upward trajectory, which is really scary because we don't see that for anybody else. And so that's like a potential possible future direction that I can study to just see like why have preterm birth rates been on the rise for foreign-born Hispanic women since 2016, like more so than for anybody else. So that was the first result that we found. And then I was just wondering if maybe, excuse me, if maybe within foreign-born Hispanic women, there was that protective agent carried like beyond preterm birth. So we also have like NICU admission rates. And I just wanted to ask the same question. What happens if we stratify by US-born versus not US-born women among Hispanic women and like in NICU rates, which is the admissions, like ICU admissions for the babies, right? And so if you see here, the reddish orange line symbolizes NICU admission rates for US-born women. And then this teal line is like NICU admission rates for women born outside of the US within Hispanic women. And so you can see that there's a lower rate of ICU infant admission rates for women that are born outside of the US, which again indicates that there is this protective factor that is stronger among women born outside of the US. But then what about like the rest of the women? What about outside of Hispanic women? And this is where I came across an article that said that this paradox that has been reported among Hispanic women was also seen in Arab women in the US. And so that kind of brought up two new questions. Maybe maybe the way that we're thinking about the Hispanic paradox is limiting because maybe this protective factor is visible among all foreign-born women, regardless of race and ethnicity, and maybe it's just related to being an immigrant. And so I went back to the drawing board and we took our like 22 million samples that we have from the CDC data on all the births that have taken place from 2016 to 2021. And we stratified by the four main groups of race and ethnic backgrounds, self-reported, that we had. And then we saw like US born versus not US born. And so what we found was pretty much the same thing, that preterm birth rates are lower in every single race and ethnicity category when women are born outside of the US. And that might not be super easy to read here because the rates are different for every graph. But statistically speaking, women born outside of the US that come here have this protective factor regardless of race and ethnicity. And so I thought that was very big. Like, what is it about being an immigrant that means that you have this protection, or like, what's going on, you know? So to conclude, there's a protective factor among foreign-born Hispanic women with lower preterm birth and NICU rates. However, there has been this alarming increase for this subset for like Hispanic foreign-born women. And then also the epidemiological paradox is not just limited to Hispanic women, as we see in every single article, but instead it's more related to women born outside of the US. And so for the discussion, a lot of the articles that I was reading talk about how maybe there's three things going on that are protecting people from adverse health outcomes that are seen in like immigrant households, which is just like family, the importance of encouraging and maintaining close family friendships that is very prominent within multi-generational households. And then just respect, the status that we have for elders and their advice. And then also religion, call it a placebo effect or call it religion, but I think there's something to be said about the trust that you have when you just leave it all up to in the hands of God and just say whatever happens, happens. And I thought it was really nice to see these three different things that are very prominent in like my community and in my household being stated in scientific articles. So that's why I quoted them here. And then something that I thought was worth talking about, especially because of where I was at, was this one other result that we found where women with more education have more protection against adverse health outcomes. So a potential point of intervention to mitigate adverse health outcomes among foreign-born Hispanic women is to fund higher education. And I use this graph right here, which pretty much just says that if you have a higher than a high school degree, you were more protected against preterm birth during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I thought that was huge, because this is a way to better health outcomes just by having higher education. And so just by funding higher education, we can assist these adverse health outcomes and tackle that disparity. And then these are just my acknowledgements, my mentor who pushes me to be the best version of myself, that helped me get my first publication, and then all the people from Ideas that paid for everything for these conferences, and then my family. And I'll cut it short, but thank you all.
Yay! I would say clapping in the Zoom room, showing some reactions, some love. Zyra, thank you so much. I was not too familiar in terms of the health side. I had not heard of the Hispanic paradox. So that was new for me, I would say. And especially now hearing that it's not just for Hispanic or Latinx folks, that you found that trend across multiple immigrant groups. So I would say thank you to the folks. Continue to throw questions in the chat. We're going to ask each of those towards the end. I would say I know that I'm definitely thinking about what does the language of better birth outcomes mean? Is that just that they actually had a successful birth? Is that admission to the NICU or time in the NICU? And then understanding that is, I would say, for like the actual child versus the mother. So now I'm thinking about, is the Hispanic paradox relevant for mothers and the outcomes of the mothers, not just the children? So all things for me to kind of percolate, especially when we think about how stress manifests itself in a lot of ways. Since you named quite a few of those additional stressors like citizenship. But thank you. Up next, we have Jinyi Cheng, who is a second-year political science and data analytics major. Her research is around spousal abuse and women's legal consciousness, cases from magazines and newspapers in China in the 1930s. And her mentor is Professor Weijing Liu in the history department. And so I'll pass it on over.
Hi, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Let me share the screen. Can everyone see my my slides?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry, I don't know. Okay, so my presentation is about the spousal abuse and how women in the 1930s in China process legal consciousness and agency in navigating this situation. And I am part of the program and the HIE 190, the about the agency and legal consciousness. And I was trying to apply the legal Q&A cases in the periodicals during the 1930s to study how women leverage available resources and through their familial and social networks to resist the situation despite the limitations of laws and the socioeconomic disadvantages to protect their rights. And I think this research can potentially shed light into the historical study of the ordinary people's life experiences with the available sources. Because one main challenge of studying about the ordinary people's life 1 century ago is that the many people they didn't have the resource to preserve records about their life experiences. So historians often need to utilize like available resources and find creative ways to study about the details of people's lives. And so I think through this study, it can also draw broader implications to understand women's agency and resilience within the challenging historical context. In this case, it was like the constraint of the legal system and limited resources they had, and structural oppressions of social norms that discourage women from seeking justice when experiencing domestic abuse. And so to give a background of this following the of the last Chinese Empire, Qing were some reform-minded individuals who linked the traditional family norms rooted in Confucian ideologies to the situation of Chinese people being subjective to authorities, and they think that this is one main reason why why China became weak and become vulnerable to the foreign invasions. So these people believe
question. Just to pause you for a second. You've been cutting in and out for us. Would you be able to turn your camera off so we can still hear that audio? That might help bandwidth a little bit better.
I see.
Beautiful. Yeah, I would say let's try that. Sorry, feel free to keep going.
I see. Is it better now?
It seems like yes, but yeah, keep talking and we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Thank you. So these people, they linked the emancipation of women to a comprehensive social changes that they believe were essential for changing the Chinese society. And because of the political instability during this time, they think that these new ideas were like essential for for people to become more independent-minded citizens. And the picture in the right is about the May 4th movement, which was a climax of the new ideas in this period. And there were like Chinese students protesting against the government of like accepting the Treaty of Versailles, and they were demanding the current the Chinese government to refuse the international treaty. And so in the context of these new ideas, the main two main parties during that time, the Nationalist Party and the Communist Party, both adopt the narrative portraying women as powerless and hopeless victims of the old society featured by those traditional Confucian ideologies. And this portrayal of women has been influential throughout the study of Chinese history and today's perception of women during that time. So my studies focus on the context of the new law implemented by the Nationalist Party in 1931. After the party established control over a significant portion of the Chinese territory, they implement the Civil Code of the Republic of China, which was viewed as the first modern law in China, which granted women equal status with men and treat people as right-being individuals. And it has some significant advancements, such as it prohibits bigamy and sponsors people's right to decide on their own marriages, which is different from the Qin dynasty when marriages were often decided by people's parents. And it also grants women the right to property and the right to divorce, and also the no for party to seek remedies and alimony. And it also gives 10 grounds for divorce, and one of the ground is the spousal intolerable abuse. And in the original term, it said that when there is like a such ill treatment from the other spouse as to render it intolerable to live together, the one party can bring a divorce lawsuit to the court to obtain a divorce. And this definition is much more expansive than in the code in the Qin Empire, because during the Qin, the wife's natal family can only sue when the wife's injury involves broken bone or tooth specifically. So this new law gives like a broader definition of the abuse that could be a ground for divorce. And Professor Kuo studied archived divorce court cases, and she found that there was a significant increase of the marital litigations brought by women in 1930s to 1940s. And she thinks that it suggests women have been developed legal consciousness and viewing spousal abuse as like a infringement of their rights instead of like a misfortune in their life. And the spousal abuse was actually the most common ground cited by women when they brought divorce lawsuits. However, in fact, their ability to succeed in those litigations was limited because the definition of this intolerable abuse was different among women, husbands, and judges. And in some cases, the women think that the abuse has been very serious, but the husbands as well as the judges might think that it's not serious enough to warrant a divorce. And the judges often rule against women who request for divorce because they were during this time period of social and political instability. There were many single men during that time, and the judges they try to not grant divorces and to maintain conjugal units because the state has like an interest to prioritize the social stability, and they worry that too many divorce will contribute to more instability. And they also uphold the traditional patriarchal ideologies, thinking that spousal abuse is generally tolerable, and a woman should like tolerate this unless it's like really egregious. And so they often deem abuse as minor and occasional, and they also require women to provide adequate evidence, such as the hospital and police document and impartial witnesses, which the women were often unable to provide. So in my research, I focus on the legal inquiries sent by the women who were planned to bring a divorce lawsuit. And I look at the magazine called Linglong and the newspaper called the China Times, which provide a legal consultation column where the people can mail their questions to the magazine or the newspaper, and they will have the lawyers answer the questions and post both the questions and answers on their newspaper or magazines. So I collect these materials that was occurred during 1932 to 1935. And the previous picture on the left is a cover of the Lino magazine. This magazine was like a woman-oriented magazine during that time, and it had been very popular among urban women. They also provide like legal consultation for women. And this first picture on the right is the China Times newspaper. And on the newspaper, it also provide like legal Q&As that like to like answer individuals' questions. So I analyze those primary sources to identify patterns and insights into women's agency and legal consciousness. And I also analyze them within the historical context by contextualizing these findings in the social, political, and legal landscape of the 1930s China. So first, I reviewed the studies about the literacy rate and the educational resources for women during that period. And in the urban area like Shanghai, where the Linglong magazine and the newspaper were published, there was a higher like education rate for women. Like there are about like nearly 30% of the primary school students being female. And in 1931, there were like a certain number of female students attending middle school and high school. However, this is still a limited number, and so although there were some women who were able to access some educational resources, like for most women, it's still very difficult for them to be educated. And also in 1935, the Nationalist Party implement like a literacy movement to increase the number of people being more literate. And this also suggests that there were a considerable number of illiterate people even in Shanghai. Also, on the other hand, China was mostly composed of rural population during the early 1930s. It was estimated that about 75 to 80% of the total population were living in rural areas. And in the rural areas, only 2.2% of rural women ever received some education, and the literacy rate was just 1.2. Therefore, it was very difficult for these women to access legal resources, and even to like write a legal inquiries themselves. It might be impossible for most women. However, I have found that many women were able to utilize their familial or friend networks, and which means they had their like friends or relatives to write the questions for them and mail to the press, so that like they were able to have their question answered. So based on my analysis of those legal inquiries, I found that women have shown their awareness of possible legal means to protect their rights and address their needs despite their lack of legal knowledge. Although they don't know like the specific laws that can help them address their situation of domestic abuse, they were able to like translate those uncertainty and experiences of injustice into the like specific legal questions they think are they need to ask to possibly improve their situation. And they also leverage available resources by taking the action of sending legal inquiries and to utilize their networks to help them access this resource. Despite that, many women stated that they don't have money and they are possibly illiterate and also the legal resources for them were extremely limited. So they still managed to access those legal consultation, and through their formulation of the legal questions, it can be observed that they had the ability to analyze their situations and deliberately consider the possible strategies for them to change their situation within the limited legal framework and within this challenging historical context. I found 2 examples of the legal inquiries I think that are interesting. One is from Miss X, because her name wasn't written in the inquiry, so I just call her by Miss X, and this is the original material of the legal inquiry. Here is their questions, and the lawyers will have their answers after the question, and this inquiries were posted on magazines or newspapers, so that the other readers can also look at these answers and have more legal knowledge. And so in this specific case, Miss X's husband took 2 concubines, and she had been experiencing spousal abuse for a long period. As a result, she was forced to live outside alone to escape from abuse. She had her relative wrote the letter on her behalf, asking that now my relative wants to file a lawsuit to the county government, but has several questions. Please offer some guidance on them. Does Mr. A violate the criminal law by taking concubine? Can she file a criminal lawsuit? And Mr. X is a respectable businessman who owns real estate worth about 30 to 40,000. How much share can my relative get? My relative is already at her 60s and wants to request for an alimony of 5,000 yuan. Is it legal? However, my relative now lives outside alone and has no money. If she requests for an alimony, she will need to pay legal fees. The cost is really too high for her to afford. Can the law provide any aid? So from this type of inquiries, I found that although it's obviously these women lack the legal knowledge, which is why they need to utilize the legal Q&A to get more information, and they were able to consider the possible legal actions they can take, and because it was very difficult to get a divorce on the ground of spousal abuse. So some women who also had whose husband took concubine, they also consider if they can if they could hold their husband responsible for taking concubine, which is easier to prove than the spousal abuse. And because the law and the civil code also prohibits concubine, so many women consider this as a possible legal action they can take to divorce or to get remedies.
Jinyi,
And,
I thank you so
Miss
much
X-
for Jinyi, thank you so much for these examples and the research that you're doing.
So
For the sake of time, I'm actually going to pause you there. And towards the end, I would say happy to have you finish the rest of your presentation. I just want to be conscientious of each of our speakers' times. But it's so interesting to hear about the various waves of those movements across the globe. I would say I'm not as familiar with, especially 1930s China for some of the more social platforms to be able to pull these examples from. And you named the grounds for divorce was really that was severe physical abuse. And we know that mental and emotional abuse can be debilitating. And so that might be hard to be able to get a gauge. And so you sharing that concubines might be one of those things that folks are able to use as leverage. And I know even in the chat, we said even today, it can be hard for individuals to determine maybe for themselves if something constitutes abuse and not knowing what support that they can lean on. Women have been ingenious in the ways that we continue to leverage those resources. If folks are familiar maybe with the concept of mutual aid, but how sometimes our processes and policies may fail us and that movements don't move fast enough. I do want to explicitly plug Carrot SARC as a campus resource for folks who may need support around gender and power-based violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's that purple ribbon. And 211 is a place for San Diego community members to start to potentially get some of those resources. But with that, I do want to introduce our next speaker, which is Isabel Keppen, is a fourth-year communication major with a minor in human rights and migration. Isabel's research is around Black women's experience at predominantly white institutions, or PWIs, with a focus on intersectionality and racial projects. And her mentor is Dr. Boetma Boteng in the communications department. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. But Isabel, would love to hear about your research.
Definitely. 1 second. I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen really quickly. Wait, can everyone see okay?
It says it's still loading, at least
okay.
on our end.
Okay. Let me see.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Sorry. I think I just need to present it this way. I'm not sure if the slideshow version is going to work, if that's okay.
Do what you need to. Floor is yours.
Okay. Sorry about that. So my research was on Black women's experience at predominantly white institutions. I conducted this research with a focus on intersectionality and racial projects. And I was able to complete this research with the help of my mentor, Professor Boateng, in her class COM 138, which was Black Women, Feminism, and Media. So my goals for this research were to take a closer look at the systems in place that negatively impact Black female students at predominantly white institutions, and look at how Black women feel and respond to these systems, and how Black Greek organizations, also known as the National Pan-Hellenic Council, have improved campus life by creating community and support at PWIs. Being a woman at an institution of higher learning in itself is difficult, or in any educational spaces. However, in this presentation, I wanted to take an intersectional viewpoint of the female experience in college and examine the racial projects at play that impact Black women at PWIs. This brings up not only the importance of Black community in college campuses, but also a community of women, both of which provide an important level of support. So the theoretical framework I used to conduct this research was the term intersectionality, which was coined by critical race theorist Kimberly Crenshaw. This is a term used to define intersecting identities such as race and gender. And then also racial projects, which was defined by Michael Omi and Howard Wynot in Racial Formation in the United States. This describes the organization of social structures and institutions by race. And they also define anti-racist projects as the challenging or undoing of racialized social structures. And then I also wanted to point out that a PWI, or predominantly white institution, is a university in which 50% or more students are white. So the methodology I used was a content analysis of various school newspapers, such as Stevenson University and Southern Illinois University. And through the interviews done at these school newspapers, I was able to look at firsthand experiences of Black women who have attended or who do attend predominantly white institutions. So I wanted to talk about intersectionality. So why do PWI campuses need to utilize intersectional thinking? Because there's often a lack of visibility and a lack of support and aid through university services for Black women. So what this looks like is under attention in the classroom, racial bias from professors and students, and these struggles are kind of exacerbated by being a woman of color because discrimination is based on race and gender. So in a study done by Sienna Leith and Tabby Cavos in their article, Black Women's Experiences of Campus Racial Climate and Stigma at Predominantly White Institutions, Insights from a Comparative and Within Group Approach from STEM and non-STEM majors, Black women reported that they were often treated differently in class when interacting with professors, and that created a feeling of uncertainty in continuing their education. And also one student, Ashley Hinton, was interviewed for the Southern Illinois University newspaper, The Daily Egyptian. And she discussed how she felt that the pressure to prove herself in classes took a toll on her mental health. And in the classroom, I mentioned a little earlier, under attention, over attention, stereotyping, sexual harassment and isolation are common experiences among Black women at PWIs. And then I also wanted to talk about racial and anti-racist projects. So racial projects are simultaneously an interpretation, representation, or explanation of racial identities and meanings in an effort to recognize and distribute resources along particular racial lines. That's a definition from Omi and Wynot. And so what this sometimes looks like is microaggressions, like that everyday, like subtle, unintentional or intentional behaviors that contribute to racial stigmatization and stereotyping. This also looks like a lack of confidence and trust in others based on racial lines. And so some anti-racist projects, which as Omi and Wynot say, undo or resist structures of domination based on racial significations and identities. This looks like increased support and recognition, co-mentoring relationships, and cultural and ethnic organizations. And then I wanted to touch on co-mentoring relationships because it was something really interesting I found in my research. So Baldwin and Johnson wrote about this, and they defined it as a more egalitarian form of mentoring where those involved in the mentorship relationship contribute to the care and development of one another, regardless of who is thought to possess more knowledge and or experience. And then it also looks like cultural and ethnic organizations. And an example of an anti-racist project that I focused on in my research was the National Panhellenic Council. This is also known as the Divine Nine, founded in May of 1930 at Howard University. It's historically Black Greek life organizations made up of 4 sorority chapters and 5 fraternity chapters. These have been established for decades and are a way to build levels of community for Black women at PWIs. So they provide academic, social, and professional resources that may not be previously accessible at PWIs. And from the Stevenson University student newspaper, one of the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, Jalen Perry, I'm just going to quote her here. She says, "Being a part of a Black sorority here at Stevenson has made my college experience 10 times better and easier. I came in as a transfer student mid-COVID and did not get to meet many people until I became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I felt a sense of comfort, especially being at a PWI and being the only Black sorority on campus. Many times you may not find people that understand you or can fully connect with you. So when I became a member, it made me feel accepted being around other Black women that understand me." And I wanted to highlight this as an important anti-racist project because Black sororities are an intersectional space between race and gender and provide an extra level of support on these campuses that can sometimes be very isolating. So the NPHC sorority chapters are an intersectional organization that act as anti-racist projects. They challenge social structures defined by race on college campuses and contribute to a more positive college experience for Black women who attend PWIs. Social life for students acts as a support system away from home and can be important for students' mental health. And in turn, it creates a healthy environment for learning. At PWIs, community for Black women is different than other institutions such as HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And so I want to mention before I wrap it up that Greek organizations do have a long history of exclusion and racism. And the NPHC was created to combat racial isolation at PWIs, and they continue to act as a close-knit community for Black women to connect with one another on these campuses. And then lastly, I've included this QR code to learn more about the NPHC chapters here at UCSD. And I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for this opportunity to present my research. Thank you to my mentor and the other presenters. Yeah, that's kind of it for me. Thank you.
Isabel, thank you so, so much. I, as a higher education professional, I think about this all the time about that. What do we do, especially with Triton Days coming up? Just saw that email. That'll be April 13th. But we need to think beyond just recruiting diverse students. But what are we doing to retain them at the university? A key indicator of whether or not students will persist at an institution is that sense of belonging. I love that you shared that mentorship, that really going both ways for that relationship, for that benefit, that knowledge is not just one direction, that it really is shared across both boats. Also, if folks did not know, our NPHC Plaza was revealed this year. It is in the original student center between the main gym and our Black Resource Center, which is one of our sibling centers. And you can actually see it from our Women's Center balcony. It is absolutely gorgeous, but really honors the Divine Nine for the work that those orgs have been doing to create community and that sense of home. If and when I would say I pulled a couple of links because I'm always curious in terms of ever shifting demographics, that if people have not checked out the information center across the UCs, you can actually search by different race and ethnicity. You can search by college year. You can search by specific institution. This goes back 10 years. So you can search by residency, honors courses, gender identity, sexual orientation. So I'm always someone who likes to play in some of those stats as, again, we continue to see ever-shifting demographics of folks at our institutions. But again, who is being admitted and who is starting their journey with us is not always who ends their journey with us. And I'm very excited for spring, this season of celebration that is graduation, like our Latinx graduation, our Black grad, that again, some of our sibling centers for those other resource centers out of VCEDI. And in case folks are not as familiar with the concept of intersectionality, that again, was shared, really has its roots in Black feminist activism coined by our critical race scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw. And that was back in 1898, which does not feel like that long ago. But I also would encourage folks to actually watch Kimberly Crenshaw's TED Talk if you have not seen it. This one really talks about the urgency of language, that she was really a key proponent of the hashtag Say Her Name, which explicitly names the epidemic that is police violence against Black women. That the Say Her Name movement was actually created by the African American Policy Forum, which Kimberly Crenshaw is a co-founder and executive director of. So the three of y'all, thank you so much for your insights, for your time, and for I would say this is emotionally laborious work. I would say, I'm sure physical time that it takes to look through this data to be able to make meaning of people's stories, that yes, that is time. But whenever we think about this added layer of gender and gender equity work, that there is mental and emotional things that may bring up for us. So I just want to say thank you. With that, I would love to dive into some of the questions. I saw that Zyra's actually started answering some of the questions in the chat, talking about what data we actually already have access to related to health insurance, for various rates, if access to insurance plays a role, and sounds like something that she might be interested in doing in the future. Also, Zyra shared that wanting to know why maybe preterm birth rates have been on an alarming rise for foreign-born Hispanic women since 2016, that may need and warrant moving away from CDC data to maybe a mixed method approach. So I think for a lot of these, it was looking at pre-existing data. And so I would say I am very curious to know if and when any of our researchers would want to do some of that research firsthand and engaging in those stories, and sitting in some of those spaces, while also kind of naming and being aware of what are the identities that I hold, that I bring into some of those spaces. Jingyi, I would say I'll prompt our first question to you if you're able to unmute, but I would be curious to know if you were and or are continuing your research, what maybe would be that central question for you in your study, and how would you answer those questions? Would that be looking at other magazines and newspapers? Is there well cataloged resources that exist to be able to see those cases that came through and if they were successful? But yeah, would be curious to know if you were to continue your research, kind of what direction would that go?
I see. Thank you, Hannah. And sorry for running out of time. Sorry, when I opened the slide to the full screen, the messages didn't pop up, but I thought they would pop up, so that I didn't see the notification. I'm sorry. And to address your question, it's a really wonderful question. Actually, I was looking at like other newspapers through the microfilms to get more resources, because the resources I have get is through a database online, and it doesn't contain all the newspapers that have legal increase during 1930s. And I found that the UCSD library have the microphone of the newspapers that I can utilize. So last week I had been trying to use the microfilm to see more sources, and I think I will possibly utilize this new resource to see like a broader pattern of the challenges faced by this woman who experienced domestic abuse in 1930s, and also to study like how they navigated situations.
I love it. Thank you so much. As we think about research being such a process, whether that be past, present, or future, I would be curious, Isabel, next question is for you. What inspired or motivated you to research this particular topic?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So In our class, it was Black Women, Feminism, and Media. We learned a lot about identity and like spaces for Black women. And I'm a member of a Greek organization myself. And so we talk sometimes about the multicultural fraternities and sororities on campus. I also just like on like social media and just in conversation like with other people, learning about the Divine Nine and historically Black Greek organizations. I really wanted to look into it closer and see what role they play at PWIs, just because it's a very different experience, I'm sure, from being at an HBCU. And I know we have them here at UCSD as well, especially like with the opening of the NPHC. I forget what it's called. It's the
Plaza is what we're
Plaza,
calling
right?
it.
Yeah. Just having more like knowledge about NPHC and what that has meant for people, and what role it plays on college campuses was really interesting to me, and just creating spaces that are intersectional and really identify a lot of different people that are here on campus.
I always love hearing about what classes we offer at this institution. In my bio, we had shared that I've been in this role for about a year and a half, and I would say I work much more closely on the student affairs side. So when I hear this gorgeous catalog of what we offer and the faculty that are doing this research and where they're focusing their time and energies of what we have offered, I'm like, can I just enroll? Can I shadow that class? There's so much that, yeah, I would be curious to know to expand my own learning. When I do think about my students and the learning that they're going through, I think we constantly have these conversations around motivation. So it's one thing to what motivates or inspires you initially, but potentially how do you stay motivated? So Zyra would be so curious about how did you stay motivated? I would say it sounds like you're still really interested in continuing to do this work. Were there people or processes kind of along the way that supported you in the journey? And I know that you named and you shared photos of your family that has been so important to you. When we talk about we don't do this work alone, that community piece is so important. So yeah, Zyra, so curious what helped you stay motivated through your research journey.
Good question. It's been very hard. Like, I think this has been the most challenging quarter I've had in my life. I actually had to take incomplete for my classes just to be able to do these research conferences. And a lot of it has been me not understanding how much time things really take and like overcommitting. And I think not only just staying motivated, I think just like staying on it and just trying to finish, like looking like just this 1 week. It's been really hard, but being able to take a step back and look at what I want out of this, like in the long run. My mentor's PhD advisor, she took her project that was like a 1-year thing and she ran with it. And now it's like a decade-long research project. And she created like essentially her own team and like her own job. And she's studying her own thing that she wants to do. So I'm like, okay, like that's the end goal. I can make this happen. But it is so hard. It is very, very hard. And I think you mentioned something very important, that we have to be aware of the identities that we have when we come into these spaces. And that's been really big. I think it's the best research is made out of like your own interests. I think that's how you stay passionate, but it's also such a fine line to walk, because at what point are you outing yourself, and like putting yourself at risk? So that's very like, it is an emotional toll. I think it's just my family, just keeping my eyes on the prize and trying to get that PhD is really what's motivating me.
We love it. I would say, so that actually, I'll pose this question to all three of y'all, and I'll put it in the chat as well for you to refer to. But did going through this process of research impact what you might want to do in the future? If that's a grad program, if that is your area of study, if that's law, if that is working in FSL for fraternity and sorority life, yeah, would be if that speaks to anyone, feel free to hop on in if that has changed your directory of continued education or career paths or just personal interest.
I'll say something super quick. So a lot of this has been stepping into places that I'm very unfamiliar with. So it's just like the conferences that I've gone to. I've gotten so many ideas of what I want to do. So like coming back from these spaces, I'm like, okay, cool, bioinformatics. Okay, cool, this school, like this person, this thing I want to talk to. So I think research is such a good place to get your foot in the door to like a really unknown place, and then just meet people that you think are kind of doing what you're interested in doing. And that's the beauty of it, that you can change it so much. So like create a bigger and like better idea the more you're in it.
I love it.
Yeah, I can jump in too. I definitely, after doing this research and presenting it previously, I definitely went to my LinkedIn and I changed my bio and I was like, oh, like open to research opportunities or something. Because it was just really interesting to go through the process. Like I'd never done something like this before. And with the help of my mentor, she really guided me through like how to put my presentation together and present it like effectively. And that was really interesting. And like it was just mentioned, like when you go to the conferences, you learn so much from other people and all the different research that students are doing like across every single field. And I had the privilege of presenting at URC last year, and it was like such an interesting experience. And I got so many good questions after my presentation, and something like, and they gave me so many ideas if I were to redo this research or continue in the future. And it was just like, research has been like a really valuable experience in my undergrad, and I appreciate the opportunities to be able to present through UCSD. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Jingyi, what has this impacted any process for you? Are you interested in continuing this work? Or nope, it was I was curious in doing it for this function, and maybe that doesn't influence where you what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, I see. I think I throughout my undergraduate years, I am particularly interested in the topic of domestic abuse in China, and this historical research, I see this as like a part of my whole project on this topic. And in the future, I may not focus on the history aspect, and I think possibly I will go back to the political science field about like analyzing the legal frameworks and like the relation between the political system and the challenges faced by women in contemporary China. But I think this project really impacts my future direction, and yeah, and I hope to expand this project in the future.
I love it. I would say this is good energy that folks are excited to continue to do this work. I think that is just we need that. We need that momentum. Again, because doing gender equity work can be super draining. I do think we're going to call it there. Can we get some extra love for our panelists? See some hearts in the chat, some clapping. Thank you all so much for this research, really, again, addressing these inequities across the globe, past and present, because, again, these inequities have been ongoing for generations, as we think about how the patriarchy, how capitalism continue to perpetuate some of these problems at the intersection of gender, of race, of socioeconomic status. But to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. I am going to be sure to put in CRASSH's link for y'all to check out for once the spring theme is revealed. Again, thank you for having this be part of the Women's History Month calendar for the campus. I would encourage any UC San Diego community members to check out the Women's Center. If you have not, we're located in the original Student Center above Blue Pepper Asian Cuisine, near Mandeville Art Center, main gym, near that NPHC Plaza. And knowing that we do gender equity every month, not just March. So the Women's Center is open to folks of all genders, not just women. Our website is women.ucsd.edu. You also can follow us on Instagram at UCSDWC. But I would say, I'm not sure if there's anyone else that wants to close this out. Thank you so much for the invitation. Y'all, it was incredible hearing about the work that y'all are doing. But yeah, curious if anyone else wants to close this out from there. Thank you again.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple remarks to check out our website in the coming weeks. We'll have a video up and we'll hopefully update you on the next theme for next quarter. And thank you all so much for coming, especially during spring break. Thank you.